timer now. Tell us your name and a little bit about yourself.
I am Shontel Brown, Cuyahoga County Council Representative. My first elected office was City Council in Warrensville Heights, where I served for 3 years. After that, I was honored to be promoted by the citizens to become the representative of the 9th District, which includes Bedford, Bedford Heights, Cleveland Wards 1 and 4, Highland Hills, North Randall, Orange, Pepper Pike, Shaker Heights, Warrensville Heights, and Woodmere. As you can see, I serve a very diverse population from the inner city of Cleveland to the outer ring suburb of Pepper Pike. So I have the honor of representing a diverse community from the most impoverished to the most affluent.
All righty, that was quick. All right. What quantifiable work have you done inside the 11th Congressional District in the past 6 years as it relates to legislative policy?
Oh, wow. So legislative policy, I'm proud to say I led the initiative to declare racism as a public health crisis here in Cuyahoga County. That work stemmed from the work that I did with First Year Cleveland, which addresses the infant mortality issue. Which you probably, or you may know, we have third world infant mortality rates in first class hospitals. So that is a terrible tragedy that has been research has determined that this disparate impact on Black women and their Black babies is genetic due to toxic stress that has been passed down from generation to generations since slavery. So my legislation was not birthed from the pandemic nor the tragic killing of George Floyd. It just amplified and accelerated the passage. I'm proud to say the passage of that legislation was not just words on paper to make us feel good about ourselves as elected officials. It included statistical data around healthcare, education, criminal justice reform, transportation, many of the issues that have had a terrible impact on our community. Redlining and housing affordability was also included in my legislation. I drafted it in such a way because I wanted to ensure when we were doing our budgets and we needed to allocate resources, that there would be it would be irrefutable, so that my colleagues as well as the administration would have a difficult time telling us no. And that should be the case because it was passed with bipartisan support. So I'm able to work across the aisle to get things done, and it was passed unanimously. So I'm proud to say that.
All righty. What committees would you like to be on in Washington, and how would they help the 11th Congressional District?
So in a perfect world, I would love to be on appropriations, but I think that's highly aspirational. That's one of the top committees, and it takes a lot of seniority to get there. But I would be honored to be on that committee. The others, I think, which may be a little bit more realistic, are education and labor. Education and labor, because I have great relationships here in the labor community and would be honored to be able to carry those relationships and speak on behalf of the people that I represent here in Akron as well as Cleveland. And the other would be the other two, small business administration, that committee. Being a small business owner myself, although my small business is suffering greatly due to my commitment to public service life, I have very great familiarity with the challenges and obstacles of small businesses. And when we talk about different issues, I would be able to approach them from a lens of a small business owner as well as a legislator who has had the honor and privilege of allocating and appropriating funds from the COVID-19 package that we got federal funds from earlier this year, last year. And finally, transportation. I think we have a very poor transportation system here in Cuyahoga County, and I'm sure it wouldn't be much different in Summit. A 20-minute transportation or 20-minute drive for you and I turns into an hour and a half public transportation bus ride. And so to me, that is a barrier that prevents people from getting access to jobs, quality jobs, and so many other things. But not only does that affect the jobs in that way, transportation also would be important to our infrastructure for roads and bridges and making sure that we get the resources to take care of some of these potholes around here. So to sum it up, appropriations in a perfect world, but realistically, education and labor, small business, and finally, transportation.
Okay, what is your current relationship with the Biden-Harris administration?
You talking to the Democratic Party chairwoman here. So I've had an outstanding relationship. It was an honor to be able to campaign on behalf of the Biden-Harris administration for the last year while they were campaigning. I've worked closely with Congresswoman Marsha Fudge as well, and I anticipate when she is confirmed that we will continue to leverage that relationship to our advantage here for the benefits of the residents of Akron as well as Cleveland. Additionally, I had the honor of hosting Vice President Kamala Harris for our annual party dinner in 2019. And so I think of all the candidates in the race, I probably have one of the best relationships with the Biden-Harris administration. And let me be abundantly clear, I am running for this seat to be a partner to the Biden-Harris administration, as well as Speaker Pelosi, to help pass an agenda to get the resources into the hands of the people who have been hardest hit by this pandemic.
Alrighty, what are some examples of how you have worked across party lines to help with racial equity and inside the 11th Congressional District in the last 6 years?
Again, I would harken back to my legislation to declare racism as a public health crisis. That was bipartisan support and during some very volatile times. Now, while it wasn't prompted by the pandemic or the tragic killing of George Floyd, I can say with confidence that that legislation was passed with bipartisan support because of those things, right? I wanted to make sure that my colleagues understood the importance of this legislation so that even if long after I'm gone, this work will continue. We instituted a community advisory council on equity because we wanted citizens involved in giving us our recommendations. And we put that in place into perpetuity. So it's not a deadline, but what I did include as a deadline was the recommendations. I wanted to make sure that the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity got our recommendations to us by the end of 2020, and they did. I think historically legislation like this is passed and then it sits on the shelf. And so I wanted to make sure that we had aggressive timelines in place to ensure that we got some response from the community. The other piece of legislation that I will hearken to is the disparity study. Here in Cuyahoga County, it was reported that of the $1.2 billion in contract awards, only $5 million went to majority-owned Black businesses. That is devastating. So in 2015, when I was first elected, that was when the first disparity study was released. For those who don't know, the disparity study data must be utilized within 5 years, or you have to start the process all over. So at 2015, the county had already done their first step with the disparity data from 2010 to 2015. They reviewed some contracts and recognized that there was a disparity. However, you can't legally set aside contracts by gender or race, with gender or race specifics until you put forth the neutral effort, which would be small businesses encompassing everyone. So all small businesses, because the federal government believes that a rising tide raises all boats, right? So you want to try to capture everyone in this small business effort. So if it weren't for me coming in 2015, pushing that community benefits agreement to say, look, we need to take this next step, then we would not be in the position where we are, which is where we can now legally set aside gender and race specific contracts. And I put my emphasis on race because we know that there are business owners, majority white companies, who will change the ownership to their wives' name to benefit from this. So my emphasis is respectfully to focus on minority businesses because we are the ones who have been who have the most, who need these opportunities the most, quite plainly. I mean, when you think about the economic wealth gap, and you think about how little contracts were awarded in Cuyahoga County, the evidence is clear and the evidence is plain. We need to set aside contract amounts reflective of the community. So I'm asking for 30% contracts for minority businesses, period. And not minority and female businesses, but minority-owned businesses. That's the top priority. That's the top category for me. So those are two things that I can speak to specifically, where I led the charge to help put the resources in the hands of Black people and address our issues as a community.
What is your plan for improvements to our current criminal justice system in the 11th Congressional District?
Oh, so I work with a gentleman by the name of Luke Atkins, who has highlighted the great work being done in Akron and Summit County. So I would follow their lead. I know that they have, if my memory serves me correct, eliminating cash bail is one of the first steps. One of the other things that I'm doing that I think will have a greater impact than people could probably ever predict, expect, or imagine is introducing cahoots. Cahoots is legislation that is currently in the Congress, but it's actually being utilized in a few states throughout the country. And what it is a fourth option to 911. A lot of times when we find ourselves in situations that we can't handle, it might not require a police officer, the fire, or ambulance, but a crisis intervention person, right? If you have a family member who has a history of having mental health issues, maybe we don't need to call the police. Maybe we need a crisis intervention specialist to come on board. If you have a person who has repeated homelessness offenses or needs these types of services, that person may not need to go to jail. They just may need to be taken to a homeless shelter or a place where they can get some resources to improve their life. If someone is overdosing or battling addiction, that's another thing. That person may not need to go to jail. We might not need to call the police, but maybe we need to put them in the diversion center. So crisis intervention is something that I think would be a fourth option, is what I'd like to see, a fourth option when you call 911. So instead of police, fire, or ambulance, it would be police, fire, ambulance, or crisis intervention. And I think that can really have a phenomenal impact on our criminal justice system, making sure that people who just need help aren't put through the system and labeled as criminals for social issues that they're battling, right? And finally, the legalization of marijuana, that's happening across the country, but so many people are still in prison behind this. And then universally making sure that those who have served their time get an opportunity to cast a ballot in an election. So there's a lot of work to be done there, but those are just a few things that I think could be advantageous to the 11th Congressional District that I would be a devout champion for.
All right, what are your plans to bridge the educational and digital divides in the 11th Congressional District?
So I'm proud to say, being an elected official, being the only elected official in this race, I can speak to not only plans, but where I have a record of actually delivering results. So when the children and the students had to switch from in-person learning to virtual learning, clearly, we recognized the attendance had dropped, and this wasn't just in the city of Cleveland, but throughout Cuyahoga County. So what I did was I championed my colleagues as well as the administration to use some of those COVID-19 relief funds to help our students get Wi-Fi, to help them get hotspots and computers, because too often they didn't have the devices or the connectivity to go to class. And so that was one of the things that we helped do during this pandemic. Now, what I'd like to do is scale that up. And I would like to leverage that relationship with Congresswoman Marsha L. Fudge to ensure that Cleveland and Akron can get housing developments with those internet services already built in as a part of the program. And that's something that we can do to address the digital redlining, as well as the physical redlining that we've experienced in our community. So that's what I'd like to be able to do. And there's also been talk about making broadband and internet a utility. That might be a heavy lift, but I think that that's something that we definitely need to be talking more about, especially as internet access for jobs and teledocs and everything virtually in our lives. This meeting has become such a critical piece for our survival.
All right, what do you see as the biggest impediment to wealth disparities in the 11th Congressional District?
The biggest disparities, I mean, well, right now we're struggling with what I would say is healthcare.
No, the question was, what do you see as the biggest impediment to wealth disparities in the 11th Congressional?
Okay, wealth disparities, jobs, economic opportunities, as well as education. The way we been funding our education has been deemed unconstitutional. So we need to ensure from early on that our students are getting quality education, access to quality education, regardless of their zip codes, to put them on a pathway to prosperity. Everybody's not going to be able to go to college, but what I am proud of is the Say Yes program here in Cleveland, which provides holistic and wraparound services to high school students to ensure that when they do go to college, they can be successful, and when they go tuition free. The Say Yes education program is something here in Cleveland, and I think only 3 other cities in the nation have this program. Education, I believe, is the key to addressing the economic gap, but also making sure, again, leveraging those relationships with the labor organizations as well as our private sector, because right now this pandemic has devastated the job market and the economy. So when we, if I could just circle back, when we talk about addressing issues around the digital divide, those are job opportunities that we can capitalize on. The installation of broadband, addressing some of our transportation issues around road work and bridge repair. And again, leveraging that relationship that I have with Congresswoman Fudge, who has also been a mentor and a friend to me, as she releases the purse strings for HUD developments, those will inevitably create jobs in our communities too. So I think that jobs is the biggest impediment to disparities, but we have to make sure that we have job-ready citizens, and that comes from education and job training programs.
Last question, and you have 3 minutes. What are the priorities of the Biden-Harris administration for the 11th Congressional District?
All right, so the priorities, I'm starting to get into this. So healthcare, jobs, and justice. Those are the things that I think are the priorities. If we don't have a healthy society, then the other 2 won't matter. We got to make sure that we're distributing this vaccine equitably. And I think that there was some news released from the Cuyahoga County that we'll be having some mass vaccination distribution coming up very soon. So I'm excited about that. But we also have to make sure that we have free, reliable, and regular COVID testing to ensure that our citizens, again, are on a pathway to health. Finally, jobs. I talked a little bit about those, making sure that our infrastructure, transportation, and digital divide are addressed, and those will inevitably create job opportunities. And then finally, justice. I again can't be more proud of the fact, especially amongst this group, that I led the initiative to declare racism as a public health crisis, but there's also criminal justice reform, social justice issues, as well as environmental justice. We can't forget about the environment. So very happy that President Biden signed the Paris Accord climate agreement on his first day, and making sure that we continue to push to make sure that we have green, clean jobs in the future, which again takes us back to issue number 1. So healthcare, jobs, and those are the top priorities here in the 11th. And I think if we can tackle those here in Cleveland and Akron, then we'll be on our way to successfully getting out of this pandemic.
All righty, County Councilwoman Shontel Brown, thank you for participating. We don't take it for granted, your participation. And that concludes our interview.
20 minutes. That was the fastest 20 minutes in history.
You still got 48 seconds.
Okay, well, I just want people that are watching to remember Shontel Brown. We haven't had a date set, but if I said anything that compelled you to support my campaign, please visit me visit my website at shontelbrown.com, where you can sign up to volunteer or make a contribution. Your time, treasures, and talents will be greatly appreciated here at shontelbrown.com. Thank you, Terry.
All right, you're welcome. Have a great one.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.